Welcome, Liz. Welcome, Charlotte.
Thank you.
Been looking forward to this session. Hello, everybody. I've been really looking forward to this session. We are going to be talking today about sports, culture, consumer connections, and creating impact. How to create it, how to sustain it, how to be a leader in this category. Really happy to be with my distinguished panelists. I really think they are poster childs for modern media marketing and innovation executives. They have very impressive backgrounds. I'm going to touch on it briefly, then I'll ask each of you to fill in the blanks a little bit. But Charlotte, you have great academic credentials, Emory undergraduate, Harvard MBA, but really you have a great specialty in behavioral science. You were a neuroscience and behavioral biology majors, double major, along with an MBA. So to me, that's a very differentiated, different background within the marketing industry, and clearly it's a sign of the times. Similarly, Liz, you've had a background that includes both journalism, events, technology, and fashion, so there's a lot baked into that. You're also a double major that included blockchain from Columbia and MIT, so I think you were ahead of the curve as to where the technology landscape was going, but feel free to jump in a little bit more and fill in a few blanks individually for that background.
Also, Liz and I did not plan to color coordinate, but
I think you worked.
I think it looks nice. I mean, I would just fill in just when you said that that was an unusual background. I think yes and no. Like, it seems like everyone who's in marketing is interested in psychology. You know, it's sort of a common, thing to talk about. Is like that's really what it's all about. Is like what makes people make decisions or choose the things they choose, and how do we better understand and hopefully influence that. So really the two worlds come together quite well, I find.
And for me, when I started in journalism, it's the whole notion of storytelling. And I love when you think about storytelling, there's two aspects of it that I like a lot. It's packaging stories in a way that's digestible. That's why I spent bulk of my career in television, because you have 30 seconds to tell a story most of the time. And distilling something that's super complicated into something that anyone can understand. And work in technology, that's still what I do day to day. And I'm just going to correct you when you said double major. It's double masters, because that master's in blockchain was very painful. And I just finished it and I bled on that one.
My sincere apologies. I take it back.
I'm joking. It's fine.
Complete retraction. But we're really pleased to be here. My name is Rick Beispel. I'm from Cadent. We are a media and ad tech company. We provide omni-channel video solutions in broadcast, cable, and CTV. So that's who I am. Thank you to Mastercard and Australian Open for hosting us. In the early part of my career, I was the publisher of Tennis Magazine, so it's really nice to get back to my roots pre-US Open time. So you ready to get at it? Let's jump right in. So just as to kick it off, who were some of the influencers in your career and influences that really made a difference in your professional journey?
This is so cliche, but I'll have to say my dad. I didn't know that about you, that you were a former print magazine publisher. He came from that world as well. He was in ad sales for Fortune magazine his whole career, and specifically sold advertising to automotive marketers, and I realize how Freudian that is, but I remember like him taking me to Tavern on the Green for these like very Mad Men-esque parties, and I would drink Shirley Temples and hang out with car guys, and I just thought that was so glamorous. So I think, if I'm really honest, that's like exactly how I ended up here.
So taking it full circle, you've completely outed me and aged me in this process, but
it's like the salad days of print advertising.
That's okay,
yeah.
Right? Liz?
I think too, for me, one is I love people who have the ability to create something out of nothing, right? So I saw a lot of that in the world of technology with startup founders that I had the honor to watch them from day one to growth and fame. But also you have women like Sarah Blakely that create actual products that is totally innovation, also out of nothing. Yes, I think that passion from something out of nothing came from watching my mom build things out of nothing. So for sure. And because they hear the umbrella sports, I also love the theme of reinvention. I think it's something that we have to keep in mind now that we know the careers don't have to be linear anymore, that we need to constantly reinvent ourselves. And someone that I admire a lot, it's Alex Morgan, She's in a point in her life that now she's reinventing herself again. She created a media company. There is a stat, I was like looking at my phone, that she shares that it just tells a lot that there's 44% of the athletes are women, but only 16% of the sponsorships go to them. And now with the viewership growing, everything's growing, are we really going to give them the time that they deserve? So part of her mission now is to make that happen.
Great thought. We're going to hold that for a sec because we do want to touch on women's sports, especially within today's agenda. But you both have impressive academic backgrounds. Dual masters as an example, right? How have you translated all that you learned, that great academics, into practice in your careers?
I think it's about, first of all, is something in academia that I love, especially in this last one, is going to the source, right? You don't just repeat something not knowing where exactly it came from. And when you're writing a thesis, for instance, and you make a quote, you look where that quote came from, and if that quote came from somebody else, you have to go until you find the source. I think the exercise is tedious and very rewarding, and it's something that's forgotten. We end up as marketers, as corporate leaders, as journalists, repeating things we shouldn't, things that are inaccurate, especially in the age of AI, passing on things that are not real, because we lost the art of going to the source. So when you decide to learn something, it's that feeling of going to the source. That's why I ended up going back to school, because I felt that in the topic of blockchain and metaverse and digital worlds, I couldn't trust anything that were being given to me. Everyone seemed to have had some kind of a hidden agenda, some kind of investment, some kind of stake, and I wanted to create my own point of view, my own strategy, suggestions for my group, and I didn't feel I could tether to anything. So I went to the source and I learned that I was very excited about a lot of things that I became actually very conservative about, and I became excited about the things that no one talks about. That's what happens when you go to the source. You find a new way to see things.
For me, I think I fell in love with academia after I was out of it. It was when I was leading a behavioral science practice for a company called Merits, which is a large B2B provider of incentive-related solutions for all kinds of industries. And my role there was to build a behavioral science practice. I had free reign to kind of determine what that looked like. And the most fun part of it was research. And it was like partnering with academics, practicing professors and researchers, and pairing them with data-driven leaders, and sort of like the rare business leader who would want to let us in there to run a true randomized controlled trial and find a significant result that we could actually publish in academic journals, like good research, because there's so much bubbling up in the kind of popular science world of psychology, and it's very much becoming like an accessible topic, but there's not a lot of rigorous application yet being done in the business world, sort of ironically starting more in government. So we got to do some really interesting hands-on experiments in the incentive space. Like a consumer example was a controlled test that compared a referral incentive, like the traditional one of like, buy this, get that, buy this, get a $5 credit, to a pro-social one, which is buy this and get a $5 credit that you can give to a friend. You can give to someone else, and it turns out that one works way better in terms of converting those referrals. And there's interesting reasons why. Or another was with an automotive company where we tested the concept of the endowment effect or loss aversion. What if we pay car dealers their bonuses up front at the beginning of the month and threaten to take them away if they miss their target, as opposed to the status quo of paying them at the end of the month if they retrospectively hit it? And the only way to know if those ideas really work is to have a proper control group. And that's really complicated to do in the real world, especially when it involves real people's compensation. So now that I'm back on the client side, I fully appreciate how hard it is to take time out of your regular day to design these experiments and to think that way. But when you have the stars align, it's just like magical what it can unlock, the insights.
So let me just expand on that or ask you a question about that, because you've done some really good work in the behavioral space. And I encourage everybody in the audience today to see Charlotte's TED Talk on this subject, because it's very impressive. But tell us a little bit about you had the title of Chief Behavioral Officer. But I think in that TED Talk you said to lead like a scientist, you must challenge the status quo. So I'd like to ask both of you how you're challenging the quo in both your organizations.
Do you want to start?
I paused because I really
Yeah.
like your TED Talks, so I want you to go first.
Okay. Yeah. The TED Talk, my personal mantra is lead like a scientist, and it just means borrowing from that toolkit of like the scientific method to run experiments and do that as a business leader. You can do that in like the lightest touch ways we find is just in the digital advertising space, and you're probably already doing it when you're advertising on Meta, for example. They're constantly running A/B tests to see what creative works best, optimizing audiences. But, to take that approach and do it with bigger, more structural questions, it's harder, but it can be really, really interesting, like testing out different retail experiences in some of our dealerships versus others. That's kind of what I mean by lead like a scientist. And I think it's also what I mean by challenging the status quo, that you never really know if the way you're doing things is the best way to do them. There could always be something else out there. So it's fun to test your ideas, and if you isolate the impact to a test group versus a control, you can contain any, real risk. So it's really about encouraging that sense of that culture of experimentation.
And before we throw to Liz, just to know that the TED Talk has nothing to do with Ted Rubin, who's in the house tonight, but it's really worth checking out. So Liz, it's all yours.
For sure. A challenge that I have for all of you right now, doesn't matter what position you're in, what company you work for, is this notion of don't outsource the thinking, okay? And right now with AI, I saw that with Web3, that system of outsourcing the thinking, whether it's for an agency or for someone that you assume knows more than you, for them to lead the way in that technical thing that you assume it's too complicated for you to know. I'll give an example. Has anyone here done any hiking? Okay, raise your hand. Okay, great. So if you are a beginner, if you're advanced, like I'm a mountaineer, right? So even if you're not super experienced mountaineer, you need to get a sense of where the route is. You don't show up and put your life in, so you shouldn't, put your life in someone's hands without looking at the damn map. You have to take a moment, stare at that route. You might not have the expertise to know about the terrain and how to pace, but at least you'd have the responsibility to know where you're going and where you're supposed to go. That responsibility is yours, it's not supposed to be outsourced, even when you have someone leading you. In AI right now, the way that I challenge is reminding everyone of this responsibility of thinking, of you taking some time, forget the organization for a second, yourself. Do you understand the basics of this transformation that we're going through as humans right now, generative AI? How often do you use AI in your day? I use AI every day. There's about five solutions I use every day for different things. Do you understand what kinds of solutions do you use for what? If in your mind, you don't have to say yes or no, but if you're saying no, stop, you gotta do this homework. Because in my house, all my kids use AI in a way that enhances their life. They are not glued to their phones. Their lives became better. They actually have more time away from their phones because I taught them how to use AI to enhance their life, not to replace their thinking. And that's a part of work that we have to do. Actually have a list here to a gift that I can give to you, just a cheat sheet. So every day, here are these 5 ones that I use every day. So ChatGPT, I use it every day as the mobile version. I love the voice commands and the conversations. I have had conversations with friends in distant countries via the phone, in foreign languages with ChatGPT, and it's very accurate. So I use it a lot when I travel. I don't Google anymore like I used to. I use Perplexity. So for web search, I use Perplexity. You should do both. You should try different things and see what is it that you like more. Though you don't have to do it just because I'm saying it. This is what works for me. I use Canva AI every week for content production. I play around with it. Sometimes I create a concept. I give it to my team. They make it more professional. Just try to put my idea down in a visual way. I love Google Assistant, even though I have an iPhone. Google Assistant is absolutely amazing. Apple has not rolled that out yet, the capability to just say, but a reminder that time, organize my notes, like to be able to talk to your phone as a secretary, that's Google Assistant. And lastly, I like Claude. Claude is more for thinking, for deep thinking. ChatGPT is not that smart. It's not supposed to be that smart. And if you guys don't know already, this whole game about Gen AI, if you look at what it's made of, it's not supposed, don't waste your time saying that it's not accurate. Breaking news, it's not supposed to be accurate. It's a guessing game. So it's a guessing machine, and it keeps guessing better and better because it's not human. You're the brain, you're the human, you're the one that's supposed to be thinking. This morning, I had the honor to train with the person who inspired me to become an athlete. He happens to be the founder of Alexa, and he's trying to create, he's pursuing this new algorithm that will be the world's first accurate AI. So stay tuned for that. That'll be in the news by next year for sure.
So a mountaineer
So I clicked AI with running. Did you see that? It's sports AI.
Mountaineer and marathon runner training.
Aspiring, right? Because I do have. So Chicago this year will be my first. I'm terrified, but excited.
And sub 3 hour goals, so pretty aggressive. Yeah.
Midlife crisis, okay, guys? That's the hashtag.
If that's your goal, you're not too scared.
I'm trying to impress my teenage daughter.
I've had a few of those in my day. Okay, so when you guys align with certain events, certain cultural connections, what are those criteria and evaluation that you're really aligning with your strategic customers and the value of your organization? How do you do that evaluation before you commit?
Probably like all of you, it's a mix of sort of a match with the brand values that we're trying to impart and with realistic commercial targets. So we have a nice problem to have, I guess, an interesting challenge that our in the average household income of our brands has started to creep into levels that makes for very small audiences to reach. So we don't want to have all niche things, but we're running out of spaces. The average household income of a Range Rover owner is now $805,000. It's actually higher than that of a Ferrari owner, which still blows my mind.
It's pretty eye-opening.
Keeps growing. And Defender's not far off, so that we have these incredibly wealthy owners, and we actually have room, I think, to broaden that. I think part of it is that they're newer, smaller brands. But that said, so they need to kind of fit, or come close to a certain demographic. But there are also certain partnerships where all the stars align and there's just an obvious utility-based connection. And I'm thinking about the equestrian world. So Land Rover has historically sponsored the United States Equestrian Foundation, the Kentucky 3-Day. It's a niche sport that, I certainly, didn't know anything about personally, but you go to this event, and as we've embraced a house of brand strategy, which we can talk about, we no longer activate as Land Rover, it's Defender, but in any case, it's, these incredibly wealthy and engaged clientele, and it's people who literally have a need for towing capacity. So it's kind of like falls right into our lap. But not all of them are so literal, and I think that's a really big part of our transition to more luxury brands. It's broadening beyond the sport and more into lifestyle. So where we used to do a lot of ski and snowboard partnerships, for example, we still maintain some of those relationships, but instead of focusing on like the power of the athlete and the sport, it's some of that, but also a broader platform of like alpine leisure lifestyle, the après and the environment around it, so that we can bring more of a luxury element into it.
And that speaks to kind of the Range Rover House and examples like that, right? Which was Deer Valley.
So Range Rover House is a huge global brand platform now for Range Rover, which is an experiential play that I'm really personally proud of. We started it in the United States 3 years ago at Pebble Beach. We just came back last week from Pebble Beach, which is, I don't know if you call it a sport. It's a for collectors of classic cars, the Monterey Car Week. But we sort of build off of that audience and engagement to create this hospitality experience that is Range Rover House. And it's basically a fun exercise for psychologists and marketers alike to sort of challenge ourselves to bring the brand to life in a way that says, if Range Rover were a house, what would it smell like? What would you eat? Who would you invite? What would you talk about? What other brands would be there? It's fun to kind of play there and bring that to life. And it's just gotten more and more elegant and fantastic every year. So we do that in Pebble Beach and in Park City in the winter, where we bring more of the ski to life.
I should check that out. It sounds so lovely. I'll just add a bit to that. When you say values, and we heard about values this morning as well, earlier from other brands, it's really, really key to understand what you walk away from and what should be a tempo for you, right? So we have brands like Avida that are all about sustainability. So obviously Earth Day is a big moment. It's the moment that you should focus on to create some kind of big announcement or launch or an activation. But beyond that, since we're talking about sports, is understanding things from a different point of view. When we think about sports, used to be, or sponsoring sports or activating sports, but sports now means so many things at the same time. To be able to understand the cultural zeitgeist stories that happen underneath that and follow that. If you think about women's sports, for instance, you have a mental health element to it. You have certain moments in certain sports, there are huge empowerment stories if women empowerment is important for you. Even on the mental health, there's a sub-story of you slowing things down to win later that we saw happening a couple times already in tennis and in gymnastics. So to be able to identify the sub-stories and make them blow up. And we are here talking about Simone Biles and Coco, but there are other athletes that are not as big who are huge, who are building huge stories. So a bigger brand can actually take that athlete story and blow up that story because it's something that resonates with consumers. We can see today with TikTok and the younger generations that they're looking after the authentic narratives. It's very demure, right? And to be able to join the conversation in that same spirit of fishing for stories, identifying stories, and putting them on a stage for engagement, I think it's something that I'd like to see more.
Well, to that point, we'd be remiss in a sports marketing conference not to address the huge transition and phenomena around women's sports. The time has come. It's not a moment, it's a movement. Paris Olympics were fantastic. We have the US Open coming up. I think you could really make an argument, has any athlete had more impact than Caitlin Clark in her particular sport at a particular time? Do you see the investment increasing? I certainly do. And how do you view the lens of women's sports, again, for your strategic audience, your organizations, at your companies?
Well, we can see the investment increasing, but it's not as much as it should be, right? As budgets grow in 2025, fingers crossed, it would be great for that spirit, for that story not to be lost. I had, since this conference is not just sports, but Australia and sports, I had the joy of being able to be there with our US team in Australia last year, and New Zealand. Our headquarters was in New Zealand at some point. And it was something incredible. I was there with both of my daughters, and I went for a sports event. As a Brazilian-born soccer aficionado, a fanatic, maybe, it's a better word. I didn't really pay attention to women's football or soccer until about 2 years ago. And then, so a year later, after I started watching, because of my daughter, she's been playing club for quite a while, we decided to go to Australia together. And I realized there that sport right now, it's not a moment, it's a movement. I didn't feel like I was watching a sports event. It was so much more than that. You had so many men with their sons, like men that flew with their sons to watch that event. You had people around chanting, pay the players, pay the players. Conversations around equal pay, conversations around how the coaches held the pay for themselves and did not pay the actual players, and fans demanding for FIFA to hold a press release to address Nigeria, to address Jamaica. Some of those players were actually paid while the World Cup was happening because of the media that happened from the consumers, from the brands. So it was something really interactive, it was something very values-based. It was crazy. It was a historical moment that's building. We have the World Cup eventually coming here. Let's say that we hope. It will stop in Brazil first. But the sport is once again coming, the Olympics in LA. So it's a sport that is really, it means something else. So soccer now is being used as another vehicle for women empowerment and all the threads underneath. And if you look at cultural moments and opportunities, politics is something that's very important for us to be careful how to navigate it as a brand, right? But if you follow your consumer, and if your consumer, for instance, is that Gen Z consumer, this election in the US, it's more important for that segment as it has ever been before. You can even compare to Obama. The engagement levels we are watching right now are unprecedented. So you don't have to engage with a candidate or with a specific political party. You can engage with that feeling of being engaged in this moment around this topic. And I think that's when you see that you're watching movements, you're watching something that's historic, and have the courage to be part of it?
We have, to the extent that off-roading is a sport, which many of us believe that it is in some way. There's an incredible off-road navigation rally called the Rebel Rally, which is just for women to participate. And there's actually quite a robust and passionate community of female off-road drivers. And we got to know them through the network of 1,000 or so members of various Land Rover owner and fan clubs across the country, some of which are dedicated to women only. We've invited them to our other experiential events like Destination Defender. But the Rebel Rally takes place each fall in the Nevada and California deserts, and these pairs of female teams train for a full year to be the best at this and set out in the desert and have to find their way to the end with no maps, no compass, no phones. And they just find their way through these incredibly tough terrains. So that we sponsored a team last year, and this year we're actually sending a team of 2 JLR employees from our field network actually going out there. So we wish them luck. But that has just provided a lot of content and a lot of just motivation and excitement and a shot in the arm for all of us as marketers to really try harder to showcase those stories and bring them to women. And I certainly don't credit, just this, but we have recently doubled our share of female ownership with the new Defender 130. It's a 3-row that's meant to compete with the domestics and appeal to moms in particular. And we went from 20% to 40% female ownership, which is pretty unheard of actually in our industry.
It's a great testimonial.
Yeah,
and I'm glad
perhaps more unheard of is the
that.
fact that all my Detroit friends are telling me they're seeing them everywhere in Detroit. And I'm like, that's amazing in a GM market.
One tough vehicle to get your hands on right now, or get behind the wheel. So kudos to you guys about that. 2 more questions, and we'll take some Q&A because I know we're getting a little tight on time. So I just wanted to discuss creativity and creative excellence for a moment, because clearly it's great to have alignment, but if you don't have the right creative behind it or the right messaging, it's not as effective. So how do you try to craft that? How do you try to perfect it? And I'm sure it is a challenge.
Amen. I mean, that's if there's one thing I'm trying to do as like my personal moment here as a local market CMO, it's to change the status quo and raise our game on creative. Like, all empirical research points to the power of creative, and we're definitely in a mindset that overweights media and forgets about keeping creative really fresh, really good, really thoroughly tested, really robust, and having lots of it available so that we can match the right type for the right person. So that's kind of my mode for the year, is like better creative. And I think probably the most fun place for that to be improved for me is starting at the very beginning with a core insight. And not just kind of starting with ourselves talking about the product, but really getting to know our audience and our target audience, our buyers, and what makes them different. And I have a favorite insight that I keep coming across, different research partners, different methodologies. We keep discovering that Defender people they are in a moment of inflection, and they identify with this sense of transformation or journey or becoming. They don't feel like they're conquered or they're at the top of something, and they don't necessarily want to feel that way. They're always becoming and changing and becoming something new. And that has been such a useful nugget for creative spark, and it's given us ideas that you'll see roll out starting this fall. The new campaigns involve portals and change and transformation. So that helps when you start from that sort of place versus like, oh, well, we make an off-road capable vehicle, so let's have it out there kicking up some dirt. That makes it hard to tell apart from some of our competitors.
So last question for you guys. You both are inspiring, innovative leaders. What advice would you give to marketers in the room and to aspiring marketers on their way up?
I'm going to go back to the AI thing. It's the most important tool for you to understand. It's regardless of the stage that you are in your career. There's a level of knowledge that you need to hold to be able to hold your position. Like, you have to defend, you have to upskill yourself, and it's an emergency. And it's not about understanding ChatGPT, it's understanding the minutiae of it. Understanding, for instance, that when you use the Adobe product, you get there's like a limit to the kind of imagery that you get there, but it's imagery that comes with IP protection and understanding what does that mean, right? If you put that in a billboard, what kind of risk does it create for the brand compared to something that you create with a tool that's open source that you could be sued for. Understanding the purpose and the sub-stories of each one of that, risk, regulation, the conversations, there's a lot of conversations that you're going to see in the next 12 months about what is proper AI, what's responsible AI, what's not responsible AI. We know that the technology is evolving, so you need to use your lens, you need to do your work to adjust what comes down to culture and ethnicity, so it reflects things fairly. Often when you do certain searches that have to do with culture and ethnicity, what you're going to get is not accurate, so don't run with it. Understand the case studies of failures there of uses of AI that's happening out there, very easy to follow, and educate yourself to not be another one of that. No one wants to be that lawyer, God bless him, that lost his license for copy and pasting an answer from ChatGPT on a brief, and with cases that don't exist, and the judge stripped him from his license, right? So it's about being able to use these tools to do things faster, but verification should always be part of the process. There are lots of courses on LinkedIn is a good place to start for courses, and Coursera, but I think it's really about you asking questions to the model and following certain conversations. I would have like a Google alert on anything that has to do with lawsuits and AI, because that's learning that you want to learn and you don't want to reproduce.
Great stuff. One or two questions from the audience?
I am VP Innovation at Warner Music Group, so I have a lady nerd to lady nerd question for Liz. I love all of your hot takes on AI. They're incredible. I'm wondering, when AGI comes to town and AI has a brain, are you thinking about it? And if you are, what are you thinking that the effects of that will be?
I think this stuff will take much longer than it sounds like. If you look at OpenAI, runway and goals that they have pitched to their investors, they are way behind the things that they have said. The most important thing is to focus on the impact that you can make by using AI right instead of using AI wrong. When we say the AI, we don't want AI to replace us. Well, guess the first people that are going to replace yourself with AI? It's you, by using it wrong, by talking about it wrong, by making bad decisions about how to use that tool. There are companies right now that, we are not one of them, that have implemented solutions, AI solutions, and have fire groups of people, and they have already, it's been 6 months since it happened, they already regret it. They can already see the consequence. There are major corporations, you can find this in the news, they have signed multi-million-dollar contracts for solutions that don't work, and they just found out now that this future that's been pitched to us that's already here, it's not really here. But there's a future that is coming that sounds like sci-fi. That's why I think South by Southwest for me, it's a mandatory stop. Like, I'm there every year. It's my Camino de Santiago. It's my Mecca. Like, I go every year, and there's no place in the world that makes me that inspired. I've been on the board for 10 years. If you want to know anything about South by, it's one of my favorite topics. Just catch me on the side. And that's the place that you can get a glimpse of what's coming. And there's something that's being, just to freak you out, just for fun, something that's, if you think about the silicon, right, which the elements of computational systems are made of, the new kind of silicon that's being developed right now by Johns Hopkins University, it's actually cell-based. So the new computer will be made of human material. And that computer chip already exists. Right? So imagine AI on you. So, yeah.
One more, last one.
Hey guys, thank you so much. Ted Rubin, as Rick was so kind to mention earlier. Clearly you guys are both free thinkers. Okay, I'm curious to know what you do to encourage that kind of thinking amongst your team. I like to say that there are very few brainstorming sessions where brains are actually storming, because most of our employees come in with preset notions of what their bosses want to hear, or the people in the room that always raise their hand, that have big voices. How do you encourage your team to open up their minds the same way you do, and as Liz pointed out real clearly, to not use AI to think for you, but to actually really sit there and think?
You want to go first?
Well, we had Brand Innovators host an event on our campus like this where we specifically wanted to like get out of our comfort zone and learn from other brands outside of the automotive industry to think like luxury marketers. If we're telling our retailers to behave differently and behave like luxury brands should behave, then how might that change even our marketing practices? So we got some good ideas and just inspiration from the LVMHs of the world, people outside of their space.
Two quick points on that. One, it's slowing things down before we speed up. The marching orders that many of us are getting is, yeah, let's run, run, run. But you actually need to slow it down, understand, workshop it, and then strategize. We're not going to do this. Like, we're not going to do, for instance, consumer-facing imagery with these kinds of LLMs. And we should be seeking operational efficiencies. Like, set some kind of metric to be your compass before you start rolling out things. That's one thing. Slowing down to go quickly. The second one is breaking ranks. Like when you want to innovate or do things differently or brainstorm or use any of those words in an executive meeting, you need to create the culture of everyone in the room having a voice, right? So in my case, for instance, someone that I hired as my intern, because we had that culture in my team of her having a voice, she came up with ideas that were the best ideas in the room. She eventually became part of the team, and now she's doing great, and she's on path of growth. But that only happens if you intentionally create a culture that there's no fear of speaking up, she disagreed with me, and she was 100% right. And having that culture there makes the team better.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed it. I thought our panelists were terrific, and it was a pleasure to be a part of it. Thank you all.